I put 10,000 euros of modifications on this NX500. I know it's stupid and crazy and you shouldn't do that, but I think it's time now, after about 2 summers of riding with this project bike, to tell you a little bit more about what are the best modifications that I would do again, definitely, and I would also recommend you to do on your NX500 or CB500X or 500 or whatever. This is pretty much the same bike throughout the last 10 years, I think. And these are not necessarily in any particular order. I just picked from my modification list the 10 modifications I would definitely recommend anyone to do on this bike. So I think the bike in stock form has some drawbacks that you can fix quite easily by changing some of the ergonomics of this bike. Most important is probably the foot pegs. If you want to ride this off-road, you kind of have to have the foot pegs in a slightly different position to get a better standing position and sitting position on the bike. You get a little bit more leg room and you get a much more ergonomic standing position, especially on the bike, if you change to these SW-Motech adjustable foot pegs. These foot pegs can be adjusted in basically 360 to any direction for a couple of centimeters, like 20 millimeters, a little bit less than an inch. So I've adjusted these all the way to the down position, the lowest position they go, and I think that's the best position I can put these foot pegs for myself to get a little bit more leg room. And also I think the standing position improves quite drastically with these foot pegs, because the foot peg is about 3 times wider than the stock unit. The stance is much more confident on the bike with these SW-Motech pegs. These are not the best off-road pegs that I've used. They're a bit slippery from my liking, but they're okay. They're okay for an adventure bike. I'm not expecting an enduro bike performance, but these can be a little slippery, especially when they get wet and muddy. You can slip from these foot pegs a little bit easier. These are good enough, in my opinion, for most use cases. I think the second thing you should change right after the foot pegs is the handlebar. The stock handlebar, being quite narrow, makes controlling the bike a little bit more difficult, and also it makes the bike cockpit, this area where you live, feel quite small and cramped. Even for myself, I'm 175 or so tall, and I feel that this handlebar being a little bit wider gives me a better stance when I'm here in riding position, standing or sitting down. If I sit down on the bike, the handlebar is not too tall or anything. It just makes it a little bit wider, so it's easier for me to sit here. I think these 2 changes changed the bike way more than I actually expected. All right, the next modification I do recommend, but with the slight caveat. If you don't do a lot of gnarly off-road, you don't necessarily need to improve the suspension on this bike. The stock setup is fine for light adventures, for gravel roads, for exploring around. And it's pretty good actually, especially for the purpose that it's made for, which is mostly on-road riding. But if you do want to take this bike off-road and to a bit of a more gnarly terrain, I do think that even though the rally raid suspension lifts the bike only 20 millimeters, you get about 20 millimeters of ground clearance and suspension travel. But when you start from 150 millimeters of suspension travel and 180 millimeters of ground clearance with the bass plate, I think getting 20 millimeters more than that is a huge improvement. And I've actually noticed that myself, that I don't get caught with this, with tree stumps and ruts all that easily with the rally raid suspension. One thing improving that, of course, is that this is a more stiffer unit, so it's not traveling as low. So basically on the riding situation, I am suspecting that I'm getting about 40 millimeters more travel from the suspension and more ground clearance for the bike when I'm actually on top of it. Right now I have the preload set to 0 on front and back, but I do have the stiffer suspension in the rear and the medium suspension on the back. But you can already see that this is not overly soft. It is giving up a little bit when I stand on the bike, but it feels really nice. One thing I have to say about this suspension though is that the front setup is basically using the stock damping unit and the stock internals. I don't think this front suspension is as good as the rear suspension, which is kind of expected because the rear setup is really good quality with all the full adjustments here and everything. The front kind of feels a little bit bouncy, a little bit crashy on some tighter hits. And some of that is of course due to the 19-inch front wheel. It's not a 21-inch wheel, which would take those hits a little bit more mellow. So you can notice this in specific road terrain that maybe the front setup could be improved. But still overall this rally raid setup, in my opinion, for the money is a big improvement on this bike. It's an expensive upgrade, but if you want to take this off-road, I think it's mandatory. Maybe even more important upgrade, going off-road with this bike, these headers and everything on the bike is quite exposed. So you do need crash bars and bash plate on this bike. These plastics can get damaged quite easily because the bike is quite wide on this section. It's not an enduro bike profile. These protrude quite a lot on this bike, so these are the widest point after the handlebars, and these will get hit if you don't have these upper crash bars. I was kind of hoping to run this bike without these upper crash bars because this would lower the weight about 4 kilos, like I said in the original video. But I do think after riding this bike for the last couple of summers, these upper crash bars are actually good to have here. And this skid plate is definitely mandatory because you have to protect these header pipes that are going below the bike. If you don't have this in place, I would already have to change these headers because I've gotten a few hits here. And this has definitely protected the bike pretty good. One thing that is a little bit exposed still with this is the header pipe here in this section. So if you do a lot of log crossings or things like that, you kind of have to think about how do you protect this area. But this bike is not meant for that. This is mainly like a light adventure bike for me. But yeah, these upper crash bars and lower crash bars and skid plate have protected my bike well. And I don't have any complaints on the Outback Motortek set on this NX500. And the next thing worth mentioning is this Black Widow full exhaust from UK. I don't think this bike sounds very nice with or without a tuning exhaust. But you do lose a lot of weight changing this exhaust. I think it was maybe 5 kilos or something that you lose just by swapping the exhaust. You can check the number from my video where I tuned this bike. But I do think that this exhaust is a nice upgrade. I included this in the list because it's mandatory for the next upgrade I'm gonna be talking about. So the performance tuning on this bike is definitely not a mandatory for anyone to do. And if you feel like the stock bike is fast enough and it's okay for your use cases, you're probably not going to gain anything from tuning this bike. But what I like about this tune is that it makes the bike a little bit more responsive. The throttle response is better. You get a lot more pickup in the mid to high RPM range. And it makes the bike much more fun to ride off-road. On the road, I don't really care about road performance that much. This is still not a fast road bike or anything. But when you ride gravel, when you ride off-road, I like that I can just throttle my back end loose, and it makes the bike much more rideable, much more fun. And one big benefit also, if you change the air intake with the 550 performance modification, you can change it to this foam filter unit that you have here under the seat. You don't have to take the battery out for filter changes. It's quite easy to take out in and out. And when you wash and oil that filter, it takes quite a long time before you have to do it again because it's such a massive unit. So riding off-road, riding in groups, I think this washable foam filter is a huge benefit. And I am gonna give a shout out to Carpuride on this video, not just because they sponsored the video and I have the discount code you can see, but I was kind of hesitant on originally making a Carpuride video because I was kind of, is that gonna be something I want to use on my bikes? But now I've been riding with this Carpuride unit and the second one I have on my CRF 300 with on about 2 years going already. And I do like this setup. I think the navigation works well. It's not a DMD tablet. It has some benefits, but of course the price is also higher. But this does everything I need. I can use any application I want, almost. I can use Tegra navigation, I can use Osmand, I can use Google Maps, Apple Maps, whatever has the CarPlay support. And also now that this gives me the pressures on my wheels, sometimes it comes in a little bit delayed. It can take a few minutes for the information to come after restarting the unit. So that is a nice little additional benefit that you have if you order these pressure units for your wheels. But because I have a separate video about this, actually a couple of videos on my channel, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I have been happy with my unit. And something I was a little hesitant on buying because these Honda stock heated grips cost, at least in Finland, it was like 360 euros, so a massive cost on these grips. But I have to say these have 5 different levels, so you have quite a good adjustment on the heating on these, and the highest level is quite hot, so I do have to say that I'm happy with these. And also keeping the controls so clean and simple. You don't have to have a separate unit here like you have on some third-party setups. You just press this button once, it goes into the previous setting. And if you want to increase or decrease the heating performance, you can see it from the blinks what is the level currently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can count the blinks. And when you click it again, it changes. Click it again, it changes again. Now it's number 2. Now it's 1, level 1 I mean. And then you click it again, it goes off. So it's a very clean and simple setup, and you don't have to have any clutter on your handlebar. So that's what I like about these, and I do have to give them a shout out. And last but not least, my luggage setup on this bike, which consists of 2 different things. So maybe this is 2 different modifications on the bike, and both of them are awesome. You can see this rear rack here. This is from SW-Motech. I really do like this because it's removing the stock grip handles here as well, which are kind of ugly, kind of in the way and unnecessary in my opinion. You can still grab the bike from these. These are really sturdy and well protected. These use quite a sturdy equipment to attach to the bike, so you can definitely lift the bike from these and use these as grab handles as well. But this is a very sturdy aluminium plate on the rear that I can use the Mosko Nublin, whatever this is, to attach the luggage that I use on this bike. So I just slide this in on this little Nublin, twist it down, these bags are now empty, so they can look a little bit out of place, but they are just here for demonstration purposes. And then I wrap this line from there up to here, strap it tight, and these are kind of annoying. You have to strap these down with this Velcro, but nothing overly complex. Just like that, a couple of seconds. So now the bag is tied up, and I have the other side dangling there. But these bags are really nice, and they don't touch the exhaust. Even if I load these up full of gear, they are not touching this Black Widow slip-on, which is really nice benefit. I had some kind of protection here originally, but I noticed that while traveling that this is not even close. So it's not really necessary. Mosko Reckless 40, which I think is good on this bike. I think the bigger setup is gonna fit, but it's not gonna look as good. And I think it's gonna be a little bit more bulky. I have the big bag in the rear. I think this was 20 liters. Then I have the standard side bags, and then I have these aux bags. So I can pretty much, if I remember correctly, I can put in 58 liters on these bags. And I used to travel with Kriega setup on my Tenere 700. I had one 22 liter bag and two 12 liter bags. So this has more space than that Kriega setup. And I lived off that Kriega setup for 3 months. So if this amount of space is not good enough for you, maybe you're carrying too much. This is also something I had while I was traveling with the Tenere 700 in Greece for 3 months. This is the same exact bag that I had on that Tenere trip, and it's still like brand new. So I can definitely recommend SW-Motech Luggage. Everything that I've used from them have been amazing. And attaching this luggage to the bike, this magnetic ring, is so easy. You just plug it in there, it's not going anywhere. I have crashed with this luggage, I have done everything with this luggage, and it has never come off the bike by itself. Then when you take it off, you just lift from the red strap here on the back and it comes off. So when you go to a coffee place, when you go somewhere, you have your valuables here, you just take it with you, you carry it around, you plug it in back to the bike and you're good to go. What do you think? Are those the best modifications I have on this bike? Or do you think I should have included some of the other modifications I already did? You can find the list in the description and in the pinned comments most likely. And check the full playlist on the NX500 from the same place.